Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Meet the Makers, where we are going to be interacting with CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and taking a deep dive into the world of technology and innovation. I'm Karishma Rajan. I'll be your host for this season, and I'm very excited to take you on this journey. I am an entrepreneur myself. I am the founder and CEO of a marketing agency, and we focus on the B2B sector. Today, I have a very interesting guest with me. I have Vanshraj Singh, who is the CEO of Gimme Delivery, which is an online ordering platform based out of New Zealand. I will let Vansh take it over and just begin with a brief introduction about yourself, Vansh.
Thank you, Karishma, and thanks for an introduction as well. I'm a part of a company here in New Zealand. It's called Gimme Delivery. It's been a year since I took over as CEO. We are a micro logistics company, which come in the category of hyperlocal logistics, everything from retail to B2C based deliveries. Essentially, in the category of retail, we are looking at various segments like alcohol, grocery, pet food. And on the B2C side, we have our own app where customers can order directly from the app. And this is primarily food and alcohol, although we are pivoting now more towards alcohol, given that there's no alcohol only app over here. And yep, that's about Gimme Delivery.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. When you mention hyper-local delivery, can you just elaborate a little on that? Because I don't think everybody, especially the audience, knows what exactly that means, or how is it differentiated from, like, say, normal delivery?
So hyperlocal is more deliveries in the vicinity. So for example, there are other delivery companies here in New Zealand which deliver courier and other items, but they also do it intercity, whereas we only do it intracity. So it's a very tightly, closely knit neighborhood, and we deliver it from point A to point B in that neighborhood. So for example, here in so I'm in Auckland, and we have points of pickup and delivery which happen within an area of 15 to 20 kilometers. So that's what we define as hyperlocal, which is extremely local, extremely close to each other. And that's why the other word which I used for the same was micro logistics, which is delivery in the vicinity.
So while I understand that it's an interesting model, it also sounds like there's a lot of pressure for everything to be running smoothly and efficiently because you're on a tight time frame. What were the challenges to sort of ensure that the operations are running smoothly? Did you face any particular glitches when you guys started out?
So New Zealand as a market is a very small market. Of course, we have our own, notions and ideas about these developed economies. But once I came over here, I realized that one of the major challenges that we were facing over here was the challenge of labor. So when you run any logistic operation, labor is the backbone of the entire operation. So because that they are the extended arms, they are drivers, and one of the things which I found out over here when I landed was that labor is in big dearth. People, because there's the dearth of population, there are lesser people, and so is the labor as well. And most of the logistics and operations and these last mile deliveries are done by drivers who are immigrants. And post the lockdown as well, there have been a reduction in the immigrant citizens who've been coming over here as well. So that has been a challenge for us. So that was number one. And number two was in terms of timelines, our clients usually give us these time slots in which the deliveries have to be done. And sometimes, there are a lot of conditions like traffic conditions or availability of labor, as I mentioned, which cause these deliveries to be, they can be mismanaged also. So we try and keep our SLAs within these boundaries, and that's where the challenges come through, which we have been trying to improvise for the last 1.5 years.
Got it, got it. Okay, let's take a little bit of deep dive into the company and like how old is it? You mentioned that you have been running the company as the CEO since the past 1 year, but maybe you can throw some light on how it started and what was the initial spark that led you guys to start something like this? Was there some gap analysis done, or how did you think that this would be a good model, a good business model to start?
So Gimme Delivery was started about 6 years back by this husband-wife founder group. Founders also were Indian immigrants, but they were New Zealand citizens. They ran the company fairly successfully for about 4 years because when they started the company here in New Zealand, the country did not have Uber Eats or DoorDash, which are international companies for last mile delivery. That was the first thing, and the second started with a vision that okay, because there's no Uber Eats, it can be a good model, which it proved to be. But at the same time, there's also a huge lack of proper logistic infrastructure over here. There are local government-run logistic companies, but the way that there are companies in India right now, like Dunzo or rather, I would not say Dunzo right now, given what they're going through, but maybe Zepto or Pidge. These are successful logistic companies. There are still not such companies here in New Zealand who are doing very well. And then when Uber Eats came in, then the company started going in a different direction.
Like you said that every country has its own culture or like regulations in terms of anything, so it would take some time to stay there and understand how things work, right? And also understand who the competitors are and how you can really navigate.
Exactly. So the full credit goes to them. They came from I think the Indian hustle perspective, and they started this company and they did fairly well, like I said. It's only post-COVID when these other companies came in, then the company started going in a bit of a downward spiral. Then there was an introduction of B2B services also in the company, where the original founders did get some initial clients for last mile logistics for these retail clients, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. They did not go very deep into that, and that's where the company stood when we took over the company, or I came as CEO at the time.
When did you join? And I believe your role in the company was something else when you joined, right? And then you were like, oh, then you took the place as CEO.
As I always say that I am the accidental CEO in the company. So I have a very different background. I come from a healthcare background. I've run a couple of companies back in India in healthcare, mostly healthcare tourism. And during COVID, I had to shut down one of my companies. So I was just, scouting for work. One of my friends is an investor in the company and also a mentor. And he asked me to join the company as a chief marketing officer. So that's where I joined the company, wherein he wanted me to sort of see how the company can be looked at from a marketing lens, and also bring in some strategy as well to ensure that if the company was not doing well, how can we restructure and basically get the company up back and running. During my stint as a CMO for about I would say about 5 months, we saw the company completely tumbling on a downward spiral, and that's where by the luck of draw, the founder decided to exit because they could not take the pressure. So it was quite a difficult period at that time. And then, I just proposed to the shareholders that I just want to go on the ground and see what exactly can be done to restructure, not as a CEO, but just, as somebody who was taking ownership of what can be done better. I came in at the time and I realized that, okay, the company was, in dwindles. And then I started restructuring a bit, started meeting all the vendors, started meeting the technology team to see where can we do things better. And yeah, slowly and steadily, it took me a month and a half to come to a level where I told the shareholders that X, Y, Z is required for the company to at least come back to a floating status. And then, we can start scaling up. And that's where, they propose that why don't you just, become the CEO and head the company, and then, we'll see how it goes from there.
a very
Yeah.
inspiring story because not every day do you see somebody, coming from the marketing background and then scaling up to that level. And I think also having those kind of capabilities, I'm sure the audience is very inspired to know more in detail about, how you have reached here. Also, I wanted to just understand that when the founders started this, was it bootstrapped or initially was there any investment?
The founders initially were bootstrapped for the first, I would say, about a year, not even a year, I think a year and a half. However, they did pick up strategic funding from the market. Ballpark, it was about $100,000 New Zealand, which is about 65,000 dollars US approximately. They did scale up. So before we came in during COVID, the company did fairly well. That was because, in part, because of the funding which they picked up. It was an angel round from the New Zealand market itself. And yes, that did help them to sustain the company during that time and, of course, make a revenue as well.
And as of today, what is the turnover of the company where it stands today?
So today, we till date have done about $3 million of revenue. The path that we are on right now, we are looking at about the next couple of years doing about $5 million of revenue over here.
Okay, that's great. That's quite a bit of growth, I would say, in 6 years. You mentioned to me earlier that you also, helped getting another round of funding, right? For somebody who does not know anything at all about, reaching out to an investor and getting that funding, what does it take to sort of put the numbers together and, pitch your company in the right way for the investor also to believe in you?
In terms of startups, the general mindset, and we all know this, for our startups is that they just want funding for the sake of funding, big money coming in. That's the hard lesson that we have learned is that funding eventually becomes a liability as well at sometimes because you're giving away a stake of your company, and
Absolutely.
so that's the mindset where we come from usually. So and I don't blame the startup founders. Even I was the same once upon a time, just scouting for funding for the sake of just raising money, and then believing that okay, a chunk of money coming in, so we are secure over the next 3 4 years. But the approach, I think, should be number one, what is your business? Are your business fundamentals right? Are you making enough margins, or is your business making enough bottom line that eventually the investor gets returns as well? So the first approach, I think, should be get the business model right and then scale it up to a certain level where there is product market fit. And I'm repeating something which a lot of founders already know, but these are fundamentals. So after product market fit, try to scale the company as much as possible, bootstrap. And at the time when you think, no, there's going to be burn, but there is a X amount of burn required for you to reach to a Y stage. And if you reach the Y stage, then it's going to be just profit after that. Then that X burn is something which needs to be funded. And when you have these all elements, clearly put in a proper presentation, and you can convince that to an investor, which obviously will also come through references, through friends and family, and through the right pitches, then I think is the right time to raise around or an investment. So I think I've answered your question in multiple ways over here, Karishma. But
Yeah,
I thought,
I
I'll
think,
try to put all that
yeah,
together from my
yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah. It was really insightful. So, like you said, that so how long did it take to sort of like prepare this pitch or get things together? And like, how long is the entire process and how many iterations, maybe you can share you had to do?
I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of people talk about luck a lot. So I would call myself lucky in both the ways. So number one, the accidental the CEO was a lucky break for me. But of course, that was because I put in the work and consistency in making sure the company was. I took a risk to actually restart the company, but I think I got lucky over there. On the investor side, to be very honest, the investments which I got were through somebody who I met in a random conference, in a random event, uh, in India, that too, because I mean, I was in New Zealand, I'd come to India, I'd gone to a conference, and I was just eavesdropping on a table, and some two guys were talking to each other about investments. And I just, went to the table, started talking to them about what we do in New Zealand. And, I got to know them. And then, of course, luckily, again, my shareholder, my partner, uh, was in California at the time. And this investor was traveling over there. And so my partner also got to meet him in California. And in about
Wow.
two meetings, we closed the investor. He put in the initial seed round. And so, like I said, we got lucky over there.
Even in my journey, I've seen that it's about being in the right place at the right time. So, like you guys were at that conference and, the investor also happened to be there. That is also something that sort of, put it together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know whether it was the right place. I mean, now in hindsight, it is also the right place. But for others, startup founders, I would say that, just keep your mind open, keep
Yeah,
networking a lot, believe in the product, but in a positive and a realistic way that, okay, this is a scalable product. The business model is working right. There is a year down the road of the product already being in the market. So once all the fundamentals are in play, then automatically you will start attracting luck towards you. You will start looking, identifying opportunities where you will see, okay, maybe this is the guy who can come. And now, we are in a era where there's LinkedIn, there is so much connectivity that
yeah,
it's easy to get in front of investors and then,
yeah.
tell them about what
I
you're
think
doing.
like you highlighted the word opportunity here. It's a very important word, I feel, and it's also jumping on the right opportunity, when it comes your way. It's important that you have an open mind. It's important that uh, on one hand, you believe in what you are, but also that you're constantly ready to scale up and make your company bigger when that kind of an opportunity comes in front of you. So
Absolutely, Karishma. And also, to add to that, an unwavering commitment to the business. So if you are 100% committed and if you believe in it, that yes, this is where I am going to be putting all my heart and mind into that, not for the sake of just doing it or raising funds, but to actually create value, then that attitude comes by itself. The way that you talk about the business, the way that you present it, then
yeah.
it's not a how to from a book. Then it becomes an internalized um output of what you believe in, that is creating value out there, and that creates a lot of difference.
When an investor comes into the picture, there are various models in which they may come in, right? Probably they want to be a silent partner. Ultimately, they're stakeholders, but maybe they're silent partners. A lot of times they're more involved, and a lot of times they're also really playing a major role as being a mentor. So, what is the relationship with this current investor, and how important do you think it is? Because I'm sure there has to be some alignment of the vision and the values that you have as the company. So how important do you think it is, and how did that shape up for Gimme Delivery specifically?
Sure, Karishma, that's a great question. So, so there are multiple types of investors in the market. One kind of investors are pure angel investors who come in the early stages. They can be friends, family, or even angel investors who just invest for the sake of investing. But they also have these different roles that sometimes they will just invest and then be passive investors, and some angel investors are become more active, as in they be a part of the company as well. And when they attain the second role, I call them strategic investors. And strategic investors are also very important for you to grow as a company because they bring in their network, they bring in value on the business model, on the revenue cycles, how you're handling your business, all of that. The other ones are venture capitalists who will just invest in the business, and they also have sort of a similar role, but they come with a bigger ticket size, so they can come in also as passive investors or angel investors. Then there are private equity investors who look at bigger investments where there's restructuring involved, and a lot of companies require debt and equity funding as well. So anyway, that's just a context for investors. In our case, the investors who have come in right now have just come in as passive investors. The company needed a round of funding to sustain for a certain period, and since now that sustenance value has come in, where of course there's some burn that we have, but that has now given us enough headway to be able to make the company profitable, to be able to start paying back the investors. So the one that we have are passive. At the same time, we will be raising our next round from investors who are strategic in nature, because as a company, we have a very clear goal over here that we want to exit the company by the route of acquisition. So, for example, if you're a delivery company and there's a larger logistics company here who have been in operation for 20 years plus, have maybe a $500 million worth of net worth, they're looking at some sort of a disruptive startup. So instead of doing their own R&D, they would rather invest in a company which is doing some disruptive work in the industry. So those investors then become strategic investors for us. And that is something which we'll be raising as a next round. And in the final acquisition stage, we'll be looking at then an investor who can just come in and acquire the company. So these are the three stages of investment, that one which has already happened, and the two which we have a clear-cut vision of in the next few years.
And now, when we talk about acquisition, when you mentioned like very interestingly that this has already been defined, that this is going to be the path going forward. In that process, you definitely get quite attached to the company and the business. I think it's quite a conflict in terms of maybe the emotions bit that are attached to the company. So how do you deal with that?
To be honest, it's a very person to person thing. I don't think there's a blanket answer to that. Personally, I come from a healthcare background, so I took over a logistics company. And of course, there will be some sort of attachment to the company. Yes, we are building it from the ground up, there's restructure. At the same time, personally, my vision is much more larger. So once I've created a good company, hopefully, and it does get acquired, hopefully, in the future, then I would want to do something else and bring in value through some other means. I think I can practice detachment with the same as well, because eventually, if the end goal is adding value and not really getting attached to something and just sticking over there.
So I believe that Gimme Delivery is also still like a startup, right? It's been 6 years, but it is still in the startup space. So on a personal front, how do you manage to, manage your personal life and your professional life?
Firstly, I'm away from family, so my family is back in India. So,
So that
so
makes
in terms of work-life balance, initially, yes, I was putting in a lot of hours in the company. At the same time, so when you go to a new country, you also tend to get acclimatized to the culture over there. So here in New Zealand, the culture is highly skewed towards work-life balance. So it's like, you can put in all the hours that you want, but then your clients, your drivers, your employees, they are used to a delicate balanced life over here, and there's only so much that you can get out of them. So what happens in the process is that you also tend to get somewhat dragged into the same culture of work life balance. And for me personally, it has worked. I think eventually it's the quality of work which matters, and not the quantity, because I think most of us end up spending a lot of our time hustling, and the hustling has become this golden word where people tend to overwork all the time, and they don't tend to see how they're doing health wise, or how they're doing mentally. So for me, initially I was working too hard, and that caused me a bit of a mental breakdown. Yes, it did. I mean, I was a bit imbalanced emotionally.
The mental trauma that you go through in a fast-paced environment is often just overlooked. So maybe on a personal front also, if you were in New Zealand, if you did put that pressure on yourself, there is a breaking point when you realize that I need to stop this and I need to like segregate and like maintain that balance.
So that's what I've been trying to do over here, is to maintain the balance. There's a lot of work on hand. There is we have to keep the company afloat. We have to scale it up. It's a fairly small company and a fairly small market. There's also, and also the mindset. As a startup, uh, a lot of people are chasing unicorns, right? We are not chasing unicorns. Our goals and ideas are set, that we know it's a small country. We know that if our startup scales, then it will at the max become a 50 to $100 million company. And we are okay with that, because that's what our goal is. Our goal is to make it a sustainable, profitable, high valued, and $50 million is not a small valuation. I think it's still a good valuation to have a company. So when we have these goals in mind, so personally, then the pressure is not as much as our people would think. Of course, there's the day-to-day work happening, there's day-to-day stuff that we gotta keep doing. But beyond a certain point, one can only do so much. And I have personally tried to keep a good work-life balance here because that keeps me sane to keep the business running properly as well. Because
Mm,
after coming over here, I've realized that back in India, we actually are hustling so much and working so hard that we are ignoring our body, ignoring our emotions, ignoring our peace of mind, and that eventually is counterproductive. So ironically, we are hustling, but we're not being as productive as well. So so
exactly.
that's the fine line that I've tried to draw over here personally. I don't think I'm there yet. I mean, easier said than done, but that's what I am trying personally to get there.
Yeah.
I hope I've been able to answer the question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think you've again highlighted a very important fact that because of the hustle culture in India, we want to put in a lot of work hours, but are we really productive? So it's about getting the most out of the time that you give. In general, what advice would you want to give somebody who is looking at starting up on their own? And secondly, how do you really navigate again going through what are some insights that you would want to give them?
From my experience, this business was not started by me. I just basically happened to take over the business because I liked the challenge of restructuring it. And so the approach which, and I'll quote somebody for it. There's a famous author called Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who's written a book called The Black Swan, and also a book called Anti-Fragile. What he says is controversial, so what I say, I'm just quoting him. So if it's controversial, please don't blame me for it. So what he says is that college education is top-down education, where it's something which people are taught and then they practice it at work. Whereas innovation and entrepreneurship is more bottom-up. So it's a constant way of tinkering with everything bottom up and see what works best. And that's where the real innovation comes out. So I'll give an example. So the moment you, let's say, study logistics and you go into a market like India, so you're going with a preset, mindset. Okay, this is how logistics looks like. These are the terms around it. I'm going to enter, and these are case studies. And even case studies are something which is, these are established successes, but nobody talks about how at every point of time these companies have been in the right place, right time for them to
Right,
attain success. So case
right.
studies also are not that helpful according to me. So bottom up tinkering, I think, is something which is great for any entrepreneur. That's the first thing. The second is that even if you don't want to start something, if you even work in a company, then there is also a scope of bottom up innovation which you can bring in that company as well, and that can enable you to understand how value is created. And once you know how to create value, then it becomes a cakewalk. Then you can start any number of businesses, and then okay, for X amount of time, I'm going to be hustling towards this particular goal of creating value, and for this, I may not get paid. For this, I only may get paid in equity, and the equity is a risk, but eventually the equity might have an upside. So so when you have this mindset change to approach value creation, then I think the real entrepreneurial spirit starts coming out of you. And I mean, it's taken me a long time to understand these dynamics, but I'm happy to share it with everyone who's listening on this podcast.
So it's important to have that open mindset, and it's important, that bottom line that you create a lot of value rather than just looking at the numbers. When you do start in a startup, it's important that you don't stick to your profile, but you're open to taking up various roles. What was your personal approach towards that?
See, the bottom line is that every business wants to make revenue and profitability, right? So, how each department comes together to actually enable that function. So, if one really is curious enough to understand that, that becomes a good starting point, and that became for me as well. I wanted to understand how operations work in it, how accounting is doing their job, how on ground teams are performing over there, how SLAs are being met. So it was just a curiosity to understand the entire business, how it was being done. And of course, that not only helped the marketing bit also, but gave a much more bird's eye view of the entire business as a whole. I think that can be a good starting point, and the same thing happened with me as well for this company.
Great. So I think, yeah, you highlighted a very important aspect, which I wanted to ask you about as well, that how did you manage to find the right people and, what kind of an attrition rate do you have? Do you have people who are happy and they are with you, or, is it a constant struggle to find resources?
It's a constant struggle to find resources here. So what we have done is we've done the smart move. We've outsourced all our admin to India. It's only our last mile drivers over here and an accountant are from New Zealand. So that has been something which we have hacked essentially. In terms of last mile drivers, yes, there is an attrition which is there always about 30-40% given the dynamics over here. But we have we have enough business to keep the rest of them consistent and performing week on week. And it's more of a rotating approach that we have with drivers. So we use rotation of resources to ensure that there is never a lack of delivery options for our customers. Other than that, like I said, in terms of admin and everything, we've got it pretty much sorted out and outsourced.
Is it comfortable working in different time zones, since you said majority of the companies in India, or a lot of the resources are in India, so you have hacked that bit as well in terms of how to manage it.
Yeah, I mean, India is a land of call centers, right? People have been working night shift for ages. So yeah, we have people who do these early morning shifts for New Zealand. So so that's something which has not been a difficult thing for us. We've been able to manage it, and the tech team is something which we don't require them to essentially work during working hours in New Zealand. Of course, there are some escalations and all which need immediate attention. But for that, we raise tickets and those tickets are taken care of within a certain time frame as well. So yeah, we have those processes in play that we have explored technology, which is uh, which is that doesn't have any geography around it, and ensured optimization for the company.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Lovely. I think with that, we do come to the end of, the interview. Key takeaways, I think, would be that startups can be exciting, but there's also a lot of smaller nuances which have to be taken care of. When it comes to funding, have an open mind, be there at the right time, if possible, and, make sure to jump on opportunities, and also have an open mind in terms of money. When it comes to money, make sure that you're focusing more on the value creation that you're trying to do with whatever work you're doing, rather than looking at the funds that are coming in. So those were some of the key takeaways for me. Any closing thoughts you want to add, Vansh?
You've summarized pretty well, Karishma, and thanks for all the questions. Just one takeaway is that I don't think there's a how-to for any entrepreneur, that how to become successful or how to. Every person's journey is going to be very unique. So I would say go very intuitively into any business. And of course, intuitions also mean that you have both your rational intuitions and your emotional intuitions in play. And yeah, keep tinkering, go bottom up, and be 100% committed. And I'm sure there's light at the end of the tunnel.
It was great chatting with you, Vanch. I personally feel like there was a lot that I got to learn, and considering that I also come from the entrepreneurship background, I would definitely like to catch up with you separately as well to ask you more questions, because I'm sure the audience also has more questions. I hope I have covered everything that people would typically like to know from you. Thank you so much for your time. It was lovely, and I hope we've had a great first episode of Meet the Makers.
Thank you so much, Karishma. It was great talking to you as well. I really appreciate this.